Imagine a heart that suddenly skips a beat. For weeks, that heart, the vast web of ships, trucks, trains, and cranes that moves goods from Asia to American stores, has been slowing down. Picture the Port of Los Angeles. Cranes that usually move like giant fingers are still, warehouses echo with emptiness, and 37,000 brand new cars sit parked under the sun, their chrome dulled by salt. That sight is not a weather story. It's a policy story written in metal and rust. This opening scene does two jobs. First, it gives the viewer something they can see and feel. Silence where there should be noise, cars that should be on roads but are stuck on tarmac. Second, it raises the main question simply: did Washington's new tariffs only change shipping routes, or did they start cutting off the main arteries of the global economy? Use one clear stat here to anchor the drama. Bookings for container shipments from China to the U.S. have plunged, nearly half of last year's volume. That number turns the mood from poetic to urgent. A ghost port isn't just a sad picture, it's evidence that trucks aren't getting loads, factories aren't shipping parts, and store shelves could soon look different. For dock workers, truckers, and freight forwarders, the slowdown was impossible to ignore. Crane operators reported their quietest days since the pandemic, and truck drivers who normally made 2-day round trips were now waiting in line for 5 days just to get loaded. This wasn't just a pause, it was a freeze. And while ships and planes were standing still, America's trading partners were already plotting their response. In the next section, we'll see how China, Europe, and others retaliated, and how their counter-moves deepened the slowdown even further. Washington's tariff wall didn't stand unchallenged for long. Trading partners around the world quickly struck back, each one aiming at sensitive parts of the U.S. economy. China moved first, canceling contracts for American soybeans and corn almost overnight. Instead, it began buying from Brazil, even at a financial loss because of higher spot prices. The effect was immediate. Silos in Mato Grosso, Brazil, started emptying, while warehouses in Iowa and California began filling up with unsold grain. Conveyor belts went quiet, and farmers' unions demanded federal disaster relief to cover their losses. Europe joined in with its own countermeasures. Brussels targeted tariffs on politically sensitive U.S. exports, including bourbon, motorcycles, and certain agricultural products, hoping to put pressure on key swing states ahead of the next election. Tokyo sent a clear signal that it wanted the whole package renegotiated, while Ottawa hinted at new taxes on U.S. poultry and other goods. Beijing took it one step further, rerouting semi-finished goods to Thailand and Vietnam to avoid direct tariffs, a move it called strategic insurance. Each of these actions added another layer of stress to an already fragile system. The retaliation didn't just hurt U.S. exporters, it drained confidence across the entire supply chain. Export containers disappeared, heavy machinery plants canceled overseas orders, and companies that depended on steady foreign demand were forced to pivot to domestic markets, often selling at a loss. By this point, it was clear that the tariff fight wasn't just a trade policy dispute, it was becoming a global economic standoff. And as nations fired back, the pain started hitting closer to home. In the next section, we'll zoom in on how this crisis is affecting everyday life for American families, workers, and small businesses. This is where the story stops being about numbers and, becomes personal. The tariff war is no longer just a headline. It's showing up in the bills people pay and the choices they make every single day. Start with cars. Those 37,000 vehicles sitting at the ports aren't just collecting dust. Every month they sit, the cost of getting them to dealerships climbs higher. Automakers like Audi, BMW, and Subaru have delayed U.S. launches by 6 months. And when those cars finally arrive, the price difference is honestly shocking. Farmers are feeling it even harder. With grain contracts canceled, silos are filling to the brim. In Iowa, some farmers are quietly whispering about mortgaging their land, the same land they hope to pass down to their kids, just to stay afloat and, pay for college tuition. In the cities, the ripple effects continue. Repair shops are running out of parts and putting car owners on waiting lists. A dental clinic had to postpone appointments because metal tools couldn't be delivered on time. Grocery stores are dealing with thinner shelves as packaging costs have jumped 20%, eating away at margins. And the human toll keeps stacking up. Truck driver Rosa says what used to be a 2-day run now takes 5, cutting into her income. A crane operator in Long Beach says he hasn't seen the port this quiet even during the pandemic. And in New Jersey, Carla DeSantis, whose family has sold auto parts for 3 generations, has had to lay off half her staff after shipping fewer than half as many containers as last year. This isn't just a trade war, it's a slow bleed that's touching nearly every household in some way. And the next blow is coming not from demand, but from the supply chain itself. In the next section, we'll break down how these shortages are driving a new kind of inflation, one that can't be fixed by simply raising interest rates. What makes this moment so dangerous is that prices aren't rising because people are buying too much. They're rising because goods simply aren't arriving. Economists call this supply-driven inflation, and it's, well, much harder to fix than the demand-driven kind. Here's how it works. Every delay in the supply chain adds costs at every step. Professor Elena Morales from the University of California explains it simply. Every 3-day delay adds about 2% to the final price on retail shelves. That means a shipment that once took 35 days but now takes 45 days leads to nearly an 8% jump in what consumers pay. Container costs have shot up too, from about $830 to over $1,300 per unit. That increase doesn't just hit big corporations. It trickles down into the price of groceries, clothes, electronics, and even construction materials. Companies are trying to adapt. Some are using AI-powered route optimization software to find faster alternatives, and others are experimenting with slot reservations at the Mexican border, or, speeding up customs on the Canada-United States rail line. But these solutions are limited. Infrastructure can't expand overnight, and insurance companies are now charging extra for something called geopolitical delay coverage. Even financial markets are signaling this isn't a temporary blip. 3-year forward freight contracts on the Singapore Exchange have jumped by 40%, which means shippers expect higher costs for years to come. This is the new reality. Prices rising not because of booming demand, but because the gears of global trade are grinding slower. And history suggests this may reshape globalization itself. In the next section, we'll zoom out to see the big picture, how moments like this have changed the world before, and what it could mean for the future of global trade. Step back, and this slowdown really starts to look less like a short-term disruption and more like a turning point. We've seen this before. In 1930, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs cut global trade by 1/3, deepening the Great Depression. In 1973, the oil crisis tied entire production lines to tanker routes, forcing economies to ration fuel. In 2008, trillion-dollar bailouts kept the financial system from collapsing. Today, the lever is political. The flow of global trade can be tightened or loosened with the stroke of a pen. And right now, it's being tightened. According to the World Bank, 60% of global value chains now pass through 2 or more customs barriers, and average delivery times have stretched from 8 to 13 days. Trust, which took decades to build, is eroding fast. Some analysts think these walls might soften after the 2026 elections. Others warn that what we're seeing is permanent. A shift toward regionalized trade, where supply chains get shorter and countries rely more on neighbors than faraway partners. But that kind of realignment takes years. The expertise, infrastructure, and relationships built over 30 years on routes like Los Angeles to Beijing can't simply be copied onto a new corridor. And while numbers can tell one story, the human cost tells another. Workers like Young Lee in Shenzhen are being sent back to their villages. Small business owners like Angela in Ohio are stocking shelves with generic boxes because they just can't get branded products. Platforms from Amazon to Trendyol are struggling to keep their stock data updated because the flow of goods is so unpredictable. The 37,000 cars still rusting on the Los Angeles docks are more than just inventory. They're a symbol. A reminder that when global trade seizes up, economies can't just hit rewind. The salt eating away at those car bodies is also eating away at balance sheets. So the big question becomes, if these political walls are choking off trade, which brick has to be removed to make the wall collapse on its own? Or are we entering an era where new walls will just keep getting built? That's where we leave you, with an open question and a call to action. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for updates, and stay engaged as this historic story continues to unfold. Because the silence at the ports might just be the first chapter of a much bigger transformation in how the world trades. And so we end where we began, back at the silent ports. The wind still whistles through the cranes, the containers still form steel mountains, and those 37,000 cars still wait under the California sun. But now we know what that silence means. It's not just the absence of ships. It's the sound of an economy pausing, of workers waiting for calls that never come, of farmers staring at full silos with no buyers. This moment will be remembered not just as a tariff war, but as a test of how resilient global trade really is. Will these political walls eventually come down, or will they keep rising until international supply chains are permanently reshaped? What we do know is that every delay, every policy decision, every missed shipment is writing a new chapter in the story of globalization. And the longer this silence lasts, the more it costs, not just in dollars, but in trust, stability, and opportunity. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Is this slowdown a temporary shock, or the beginning of a new economic era where trade becomes slower, costlier, and more fragmented? Let's talk about it. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to stay ahead of these changes, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because as soon as the next shipment leaves port, or doesn't, we'll be here to cover what it means for you, your wallet, and the future of global trade.